In this episode of RIPPIN, we preview the seasons for the Sydney Roosters and the Parramatta Eels. We discuss how the Roosters viewed the 2020 season as an utter underperformance and how they endeavour to overcome that in 2021. We also discuss the Eels and how Mitchell Moses has his stats padded by his try assists through kicks and how he needs to learn how to play to the line and set up his outside players to really become one of the top tier halfbacks in the NRL. All right, without further ado, let's rip into it.
We're finally fucking here. We're finally here in the top four. Alex has been a ride, real good ride. We're now into the big boys, the premiership contenders, I guess, outside of course, the Rabbitohs and the Raiders, who will be numero 1 and 2. Start off the bat, team that finished 4th last year, the Sydney Roosters. Alex, you had the honour of reviewing these guys, so give us your breakdown. What did you think of the Easts this year?
Yeah, we're starting off the Contenders series with the team everybody loves to hate, the Sydney Roosters. Season 2020 was not the season the Roosters wanted, or frankly, not what they expected. I think that they, and every other media pundit or fan out there, fully expected the Roosters to do the first three-peat since, I think, the Parramatta Eels in 1983. You know, the hype around this team was huge, and I guess justifiably so, given 2 premierships back-to-back, right? So anything short of that was going to be a failure in their eyes, and certainly it was a failure. They came out of the blocks with 2 losses. This is before the COVID period, right? So straight out of the bat, it was, emergency stations. What's going on? However, once they did come back from the COVID break, they only lost 4 games. So they definitely improved and were right up there with the best of them going into the finals. Apart from a blip, and what a blip, in the final round of the season, everybody really had the Roosters penciled in for, at the very least, another grand final berth, but most likely a win. And then they had the worst falling from grace in their finals runs in such a long time. When they dropped back-to-back games, including that drubbing from the Rabbits in the last round of the season, and then they lost to the Panthers and the Raiders back-to-back. So, bowed out of the finals far earlier than they expected, and when that happened, heads had to roll. The Roosters do not do rebuilding seasons. They certainly did not consider season 2020 to be a rebuilding season, and so when it panned out that way, in a way, they had to cut some guys loose, and the 2 big name cuts were, of course, Kyle Flanagan and also Sonny Bill Williams. Let's not forget here, I don't believe he had a club to go back to, being that the Toronto Wolfpack actually ended up folding, right? So, he signed this, one-off short-term contract, but it was certainly an opportunity for him to remain with the Roosters should they have wanted him, but they didn't. And that'll be something I definitely want to cover off on a little bit more in this episode. So, the dream was over for the Roosters. Very nice. I was very happy about that, particularly because the Raiders got their revenge, and then they seemed to run out of fuel in the very next game, but it's the way it was. So, look, those heads had to roll, and now it's back to square one for season 2021. Can they turn it around? They don't have to make many changes to their roster because this isn't a bad team, and so they haven't made many changes to their roster. But it remains to be seen, can they go better than what they ended up delivering in 2020?
They just seemed to run out of steam towards the end of the season, I think. You made a good point with Kyle Flanagan, of course. The Roosters are never going to really want to rebuild, but yeah, you win 1 premiership, that's fair enough. That's a very hard thing to get yourself up for and going again for the following season, which the Roosters did. And I hate the Sydney Roosters. I think most people, except for Sydney Roosters fans, probably hate them. But you can't fault the way that team is built, the type of coach that Robinson is, and how they play the game of footy. They're a very well, over the past 5 or 6 years, the Melbourne Storm, the Sydney Roosters have been, number one or, 1A, 1B. But I think, just replacing a guy like Cooper Cronk is always going to be difficult. To have it as a young guy, like maybe if the Roosters were able to get a Mitchell Pearce or a James Maloney, maybe a James Maloney, they might have been able to look at going for 3 straight. But 3 straight in any sport, in any era, is incredibly hard to do. And you could just tell that by I think the third or fourth last game of the season, just after they lost to the Storm for the second time, everyone was asking a few questions, and I think they ripped off 3 pretty decent games. They absolutely belted the Broncos for the second time that season. It was 58-0. I think it was 60-0 the first time. So they did well against them. Like you said, it wasn't until that last game against the Rabbitohs where everyone sort of opened their eyes and went, oh, holy shit, the cracks are forming. The Week 1 finals game they had against the Panthers, I thought was one of the better games of footy all season. I only lost that by a point. But obviously it's all with hindsight, but then watching that game against the Raiders where they got bowed out in Week 2, they left everything in the tank. And I think that they really, I think for the Roosters the last 2 years, they had the week off. You get, I think if you win Week 1, you get Week 2 off, and then you have to play Week 3, which is, why the Raiders and the Storm's game was so lopsided at the start of the game, because the Storm had an extra week to prepare and just to rest up. I think the Roosters were really gunning for that, and because they fell down to 4th rather than 3rd, they had to play, Panthers or the Storm, right? Either way, you're going to be, up shit creek. But yeah, and then that Raiders outfit was just a little bit hungrier, I guess you could say, and they did get that week off against the Sharkies 2 weeks earlier. But at the end of the day, like, we're talking about a team that finished in the top 4. Yeah, you lost 2 games on the trot, but in the last 3 seasons, you've won 2 premierships. So how can you really be upset as a Roosters fan? If anything, you're just upset because we still think that they're going to be here in 2021. Like, I've tipped them early tip. I've tipped them to be in the 8, but I don't know. I guess I'll turn it over to you again. Like, how do you think they rebuild after? Are they rebuilding? You know what I mean?
Well, according to their roster changes, they're not rebuilding shit. Two total additions to a team does not make a totally new team. So they are backing themselves in that they don't need to reinvent the wheel. They've just cut those couple of bits of dead weight. But we spoke about it in the Bulldogs episode. I thought Kyle Flanagan copped a lot of the brunt for their underperformance that I just didn't think was due to him. I had a quick look, at his stats because, to be honest with you, I don't watch a lot of the Roosters games. And if I do, I watch some of the games, but I don't pay a lot of attention to the Roosters. I'm normally barracking for whoever their opposition is to beat them, right? But I think that's a testament to how successful this team is. I think most people who don't like them because they're always successful. I think there are some reasons to that are probably not fair. But regardless, we hate them because they're successful. But looking at his stats for last season for Kyle Flanagan, I was just like, are you serious? So he was still in the top 20 players in the league for try assists. Had a couple of meat pies to his name as well too. And so this guy was 21 years old when he was playing last year. He turned 22 after the season. And then this was his first season as the playmaker for one of the competition's premier teams. So he was the leading point scorer for most of the season, which I believe he only really lost because he had a few weeks rest, right? Mm-hmm. So what would have been the leading point scorer, what was one of the top try assist players in the league, and he copped the blame for this shit? Like, what more do you want? So I don't know if they're if that was warranted. However, they are backing themselves to have some pretty good backups. Like, of course, they've got Sam Walker is his name, I believe, in the lower grades, and he's looking like he's going to come up to first grade. So they've been talking about him for a long time, and I think we're finally going to see him. I'm excited because he is an Ippy boy, so good to see another Ipswich junior coming through. And then they've also got Lachlan Lamb, who has slotted in and done a pretty good job. And I believe the news coming out of the Roosters is that he's actually going to get the first shot. So they haven't 100% backed Walker yet, but I think it could only be a matter of time. To summarise, I really thought that Kyle Flanagan was made the scapegoat of that team, particularly in those last couple of games we've already discussed. So was he the reason they lost by 50-something points to the Raiders? No. Was he the reason they bowed out in straight sets in the finals? No. Watch any of those soft as fuck tries that the Raiders did score in that opening 20 minutes or 30 minutes of that final. The Raiders weren't running through Kyle Flanagan. I believe they were running through Jared Waerea-Hargreaves and Boyd Cordner and Angus Crichton and Luke Keary. These are their superstars. I didn't see them getting punted back to reserve grade or copping flack for it. So, it was just all heaped onto this one guy. And so, all power to him and the Bulldogs, and we'll see if the Roosters actually do better in the halves, according to them.
It is interesting how they handled Flanagan, only because, like you said, his season was pretty good. I was a little bit critical at him throughout the season just because my theory is playing in a stacked side like the Roosters it's pretty easy to, like, people say, it's hard to stand out because you've got all these other guys taking the shine from you. But for a halfback, you want weapons outside of you and you want forwards inside of you doing all the dirty work, and he definitely had that. But I agree. I don't think that he necessarily lost them any games. At the same time, did he necessarily help them win any games? I'm not too sure. But if you're gonna, if you don't have an identified half coming in the following season or for this season, right, that can step in there and can be the guy to sort of win now. If you are going to Lachlan Lamb or Sam Walker, wasn't what was this season for the Roosters? My worry is that the Roosters are very, very smart and they're getting ahead of the curve right now, because Sam Walker, they've had him on. In order for him to become eligible earlier, they carried him last year as the 30th man on their roster out of 30 during COVID, which people were saying was one of the reasons why the Roosters had so little depth, is because they essentially had one spot on their roster for a guy who wasn't at that time legally allowed to play because he was too young. But if they didn't register him, there was some kind of NRL rule thing they had to sort of get around. So it obviously shows they got huge raps on this kid. And then also one of the two ins they did bring in is Joseph Suiali, who is being touted as, everything that Kalen Ponga was, but a little bit more. And he's already been named to the emerging New South Wales Blues squad. And Brad Fittler has likened him to Latrell Mitchell. So I'm guessing that means that Joseph is in line to get a start in game one this year. And then even though he plays well, he'll get trounced, and then he'll be used as a scapegoat for New South Wales. Either way, he's young. Sam Walker is young. I think Sam Walker's only 18 years old. So are the Roosters right now, do they say, all right, Kyle Flanagan, you didn't show us enough. We're now kind of resigned to the fact that for the next couple of years, maybe they've been looking at the other teams and they go, the Panthers look pretty good. They're going to be good for the next few years. And why are they good for the next few years? Because they blooded in guys like Nathan Cleary and, Kikau. And, Dylan Edwards hasn't been as good as a prodigious talent, but he's still you got to give them rep, you got to give them time. Maybe now the Roosters thing, we've got a lot of old guys who deserve the money they're being paid now because they won the premierships. So let's wait for those contracts to start to sort of wane out. Obviously Boyd Cordner has the, I don't think he's going to be fit for round 12 or something like that. So obviously he's getting towards the end of his career. Jake Friend has definitely, what's he, nearly at 300 games? He's proven to be one of the Roosters' best, no matter what the game or circumstance. So you've got to pay him right. Keep that culture, pay these old guys, and then once those contracts run out, Sam Walker has 2 or 3 years of experience. Joseph Suiali has 2 or 3 years of experience. Joseph Manu has an extra couple of years of experience, and then they start, plugging into that roster. And maybe now it is just if the Roosters finish in the top 8, they keep their numbers, the X's and the O's, pretty good. They make some finals footy. They make some good revenue through ticket sales. And then maybe in 3 years' time, Sam Walker and Joseph Suiali are the 2 next guns in the NRL, and then we're dealing with another potential Roosters dynasty. That's what I think they're trying to do. Whether or not it's going to work out remains to be seen, but it does worry me that for whatever reason, the Roosters are putting a lot of money and a lot of emphasis into these young guys and allowing them spots in their roster because they're a team that primarily, when they do things, they tend to work out one way or another. So that's a little bit of a goal for me.
Yeah, it just doesn't stack up for me only because Kyle Flanagan was also that young guy, and if they were planning on trying to give some people some years to get better and so on and so forth, you'd think they would have given him even a little bit more. And I'm just looking at the contract that they had him on. It seemed as if not winning a premiership was unacceptable for them, or not making the grand final at the very least was unacceptable for them. So, yeah, I mean, interesting to see if they do just settle for a couple of years of making the finals. I don't think it's the Roosters' way. I think it's swim or sink. Mm-hmm. You showed me some videos of this Suwali fella, right? And undoubtedly, superior in every way to his peers, right? If he's still 17 or 18 or whatever he is, and he's playing schoolboy football, maybe even some second grade footy, Q Cup or whatever he's been playing, undoubtedly he's making them look silly. He's making them look like children. Many of them are children. He's 2 meters tall. He's got a great step on him and all this sort of stuff. But my point is always, none of that matters for shit when you're in the NRL. In terms of, you can look like a superstar and get used to looking and playing like a superstar when you're always coming up against people who are inferior in talent to you, inferior in size, probably even half as good or big as you are. There's been many, many players who have been like that. We've all grown up and played with them and so on and so forth, and then they don't cut it in the main grade. So there is no test akin to actually stepping up, playing NRL footy, and can you do the same thing? Kalen Ponga has proved that he can do the same thing at the top level. RTS proved he can do the same thing at the top level. There's those guys who have proved they're the real deal. Can this guy? For me, when you're that big, when you're 2 meters tall and a centre or winger or fullback, whatever you are, that to me is a big target. That to me is like, you're going to be welcome to first grade for your whole first season with just getting snapped in half. So it'll be a matter of, can your body take that, and can your mind take that? You're not going to be out and out the best, at least for the first bit, in my opinion. And then the other one, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Sonny Bill Williams experiment. To be honest, I think his signing proved to be a total flop, and I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be happier for that, because it was an absolute fucking joke that he was able to be signed for the money that he was signed for. This is one of the core areas where the NRL is actually fucked. They try to be like, yeah, let's keep the salary cap in check. Everyone's got to be fair, yada, yada, yada. One of the rules they came up with was there has to be fair value paid for signing players, right? So how can a guy who just got paid $1 million at the Toronto Wolfpack be allowed to play for $150,000 at the Sydney Roosters? It's a fucking joke. It was a joke, but to be honest, he ended up playing for that amount, to be honest with you. He ended up playing as if he was a $150,000 player. There were so many excuses made for him in that first game back, when he lasted all of 12 minutes and made 3 tackles and, just looked a bit fucking out on his feet, right? Like, he's just getting back into things. He's a bit out of shape, whatever. It didn't get much better. Like, a couple of the things, he's still Sonny Bill Williams. He is still Sonny Bill Williams. I get that. He was the best in our game for such a long time. And then in other codes, of course, in rugby union. If you haven't watched the 2004 grand final in some time, look it up on YouTube. And that man single-handedly won that game for the Bulldogs off the bench. He comes on around the 40 or the 50 minute and then plays 30, 35 minutes. Game-changing plays. Hits, offloads. He single-handedly wins them that game when it was, neck and neck, right? So this is the guy who's come off the bench in one of his rookie seasons. One of the best of all time. But at the end of the day, he didn't have the difference that they hoped he would make, and I actually think he was part of the reason they actually ended up failing to make it into the finals as far as they hoped, because he just was a bit of a passenger.
Yeah, they definitely drank their own Kool-Aid with the Sonny Bill signing. You said the 150 at the beginning was absolute nonsense, but the NRL is still at its core a money-making business, and the only thing that was probably more of a waste of money than Sonny Bill's contract was probably the Sonny Bill camera that Fox League got out for his first game, because they, no joke, had a camera that you could just sit and watch Sonny Bill on for the whole game, and anybody that was tuning into that missed 68 minutes of the game because it was just him on the bench. But look, to bring up the Sonny Bill point, I don't think he really added anything. You talk about the 2004 grand final. That was 16 years ago now, right? Like he's and I think the fact that he came to the Sydney Roosters in 2013. I think they won the grand final in 2013. Yeah, the year before the Rabbits, and it was seen as maybe even 2012. 12, yeah, because that was my 18th birthday. I remember that at the Re. I remember Jenko scoring that try and then blowing out his disc. That was a good grand final, but like 8 years ago now. So I think the Roosters thought that Sonny Bill could come in and, if Sonny Bill's not playing footy, but he can get an extra 150,000 K to come back into Australia, it'd be stupid not to take it, right? Thankfully, that didn't work out too well for them, and the reign of terror at least halted for now. But yeah, quickly before moving on to the next team with Joseph Suiali, I've only ever seen two guys come out as youngsters, like teenagers, that were big, strong while still being fast, and came out and just flat out dominated their position. And it was Greg Inglis and Israel Folau. Nothing against Latrell Mitchell. Latrell Mitchell, as we know from the Rabbitohs episode, I froth that guy. He is fantastic. But I'm talking like the way that they're talking up this Joseph Suiali is they expect him to be a Greg Inglis or an Israel Folau like straight off the bat. And like you were saying, like it's also now like they're smart where if he's 2 meters tall, like he's not going to be carrying as much weight as a 17-year-old as he is going to be able to when he's like 23 or 24 or 25. As we can both attest to that. You're just going to chop his legs just early and often. And that's where injuries can occur, right? Like when they start like hacking low, like making sure that you have one guy like wrap him up low straight away, and then before he gets the offload off, someone comes and bear hugs him and throws him to the ground. A tactic that's being used for years to try to slow the play of the ball down. Longer guys tend to have a higher chance of their legs getting caught underneath things, ankles and knees going places they're not supposed to go. Not very fun. The Roosters, I think, have got to be, I'm giving them an ultimatum here, but I think they've got to make sure that the similar thing that happened to the Broncos doesn't happen to the Roosters, and because they've had so much sustained success that they just think that they can bring anybody in there and it's going to work. Because if the Roosters, like, it won't be too long until you blink and all the old heads in the Roosters will be gone and it'll just be all these young kids. They've got to make sure that they've got some kind of, contingency plan in place where, who is going to take over from Jake Friend? Like, who is going to take over from Rio Hargreaves? Who is going to take over from Boyd Cordner? James Tedesco, he's still playing phenomenally, but as fullbacks get into the 30s, there tends to be a pretty stiff and sharp, you're the best, you were once pretty good, but now you're falling off. It's happened to everybody. It's happened to Billy Slater, Greg Inglis, Darren Lockyer, fucking Darius Boyd, Anthony Minicello. Like, he was still playing pretty well, but on the wing, like they brought in RTS there. So there's a quick turnaround there, and you don't want to pay all these kids all this money straight away when they haven't done anything, because unless you have the right system in place and you have the right guys there, you're going to have what's happening at the Broncos, where you're paying guys $750,000 a year and not naming names, but he's intimidating police officers and going to court for saying that he's going to take you all out, and that even if you're a woman that he's still going to fucking fight you. And that's what happens when you pay young, dumb kids that aren't mature enough yet to deal with that, to handle that money, just for being, like we said earlier, just being bigger and faster than 15, 16-year-old kids. It's like that Viliami Kikau doesn't give a fuck where you played schoolboys footy. If you run straight at him, he's going to try to chop you in half. Josh Parley is the exact same thing. Like, he doesn't care where you've come from. Like, he's going to murder you when you try to get on that footy field. Let's see how Suiali goes when that happens. Like, with that, I've tipped the Roosters to finish 5th this year, just out of the top 4. I wanted to place them a little bit lower, but just with the way that the rest of my teams have panned out, I think having the Roosters in 5th is a nice little spot. That would have them in my ladder playing the Newcastle Knights in the first week of the finals, and I think that'd be a really fun game of footy if it does happen, because Mitchell Pearce has a chance to enact revenge on the team that dropped him mercifully.
Bloody hell, mate, you've been looking at my ladder again. I've got him penciled in for 5th as well too. I think, looking at the ins and outs, they've lost a couple, including Orbison, who was a bit of a linchpin of their team over the last fucking decade and a half. So, there are some big losses there. I don't necessarily think they've improved, and they've got a lot of rookies that have got to shape up, right? So I've got them at 5th as well. And at the end of the day, when I was thinking about the X factors that could win or lose games for these guys, the Roosters pride themselves on being an X factor team. So I think there's X factors all across the park. But my 2 concerns overall are A, Boyd Cordner. And you said before he's taken a few hits to the head, I think, and he's taken a few hits to the head, and if he's not careful, he's going to be out for lengthy times. I think if he's not careful, he's going to be eating his food through a straw. Like, he is just so prone to getting hit in the head. I think it's like every 3 or 4 games he's out with a concussion. So I'm glad to hear he's having some time out of the game, but I'm really concerned about whether or not he can actually return and make an impact once he comes back. Maybe it's a confidence thing, maybe it's actually self-preservation or something, but I don't think there's long left in his career at this rate of head knocks. And then what are the impacts going to be if they either lose him long-term because of his head impacts, or at the very least for the first half of this season, right? He's not going to be there. So they've lost their leader. And then the other one, similar to what you said about fullbacks, and how quickly they can drop off, the Morris brothers. I mean, fucking fair credit to them. These guys have shown they've got longevity. They are still as fast and as strong as they've ever been. So mad respect to these guys. But Father Time has got to catch up with them at some stage, and I'm just wondering when's that going to be. Is this the year where finally just that 1 or 2 steps are lost, and that's enough for some of these young centres and young wingers who are just beefed up and faster than ever before, and game's over for these guys. So, if they can stay as good as they've been the last few years, and also cut the bullshit out of their games, flopping every 2 seconds, another great year for the Roosters. But if the Morris brothers struggle and Boyd Corner's not there, I'm not so sure. So 5th place for me. Righto, lad. We're on to the 3rd place finishers of 2020, the Parramatta Eels. What's your hot take?
Ugh. That's my fucking take for the Parramatta Eels. I was surprised looking back at the ladder that they finished 3rd, because I didn't think that they were the 3rd place team. I knew they were in the top 4, but I just immediately assumed that they finished 4th and they'd gone in there by the skin of their teeth. But you look at the season, they only played 20 games, I guess, last season, but the Eels I think they won 15 games on the season, was it? Let me have a look here. Yeah, 15-5, so a good season. Only 2 points behind the Storm as well. So I think about the Storm season and the Eels season. It seemed like there was a pretty big gap between, I guess, not even the big gap between the top teams and the Eels. The Eels just always seem to be just struggling and just grinding out to get these wins. And you look at the forwards, and their forwards are pretty solid, like Regan Campbell-Gillard, Sexy Mo, scores himself a 40-plus metre front rower try, which for me always gets me going. Nathan Brown's never met a dog shot that he hasn't liked, and to be honest, I think he's one of the funnest forwards to watch, just because, as not a Parramatta Eels fan, he's 1 or 2 plays away from being suspended for 6 weeks. So as a Parramatta Eels fan, I could understand that it'd be quite nerve-wracking. But as a casual footy fan, you just love to see it, because whenever somebody runs at the line and either doesn't commit to pass or run it straight, Nathan Brown's going to take your fucking head off, and he gets after it. Sean Lannery and Madison are 2 great edge rollers, big, tall, strong, can play the ball. When they're healthy, they're really good. Reid Marnie, of course, is a solid little hooker. Again, he might be the Andrew McCulloch to Harry Grant's Cameron Smith for the next 5 to 10 years for the Origin number 9 jumper. He's good, but he's very much just will get you tackles, will grind out through the work, will set you forwards, but isn't going to wow you with anything. Moving it down to the halves, when Mitchell Moses and Dylan Brown are on, they are on. Don't get me wrong, they are both 2 phenomenal young halves. But there's the thing that I'll talk about first with the Eels for last season was their outside backs, and they left a lot to be desired. I think Blake Ferguson is so close to a cliff. It's not even funny. His play style has always been strong, aggressive, and using his speed to get around people. There's always that famous try against the Melbourne Storm where he runs along the sideline and just stays in. Obviously, sunk Queensland Hearts 2 years ago by just staying in the field to play to pop it up to Tedesco. But he's never been a guy that's been able to stay healthy for prolonged periods of time, and they're paying him a lot of money, and I don't think they're going to be happy with him by the end of the year with the money that they're paying him. I expect a big drop-off there. Waka Blake is just so painstakingly average as an outside centre. He looks the part. He can run really, really fast, but there's not a single defensive play he hasn't met that he doesn't like to fuck up. Like he will, literally, like it'll be a 4-on-1 outside of him for his winger, and all he has to do is just stay on the outside and wait for his inside markers to come in. And he just can't help himself from always trying to run and go for an intercept when the halfback is baiting him to do it, and the Eels let a try in there. And he always looks the same, just like angry and disappointed, but just stay in the fucking line, Wanga, whatever his fucking name is, I don't care. Michael Jennings was good 8 years ago. And that's all I have to say about Michael Jennings. And then Sivo, that hit that he put on James Tedesco, I thought James Tedesco was dead. Like, James Tedesco's had a tough year. He's had to cop Sivo's shoulder and then Papali's fucking kneecap. So rest up, Teddy. You're going to need it for this season. But Sivo, man, I don't know if you noticed, like, obviously, like, he didn't look he wasn't in as many games, and he didn't look as damaging as he did in his first year, but he scored 7 less tries last year to 2019, and he was averaging about 45 metres less a game. And you could just see it watching the Parramatta Eels games where he wasn't the breakout star that he was in 2019. And their outside backs, as you can tell, like they won games 14-12 against teams like the Dragons and the Sharkies, and I think they even lost the game to the Dragons by a pretty close margin. And yet, bringing it to their fullback Clint Gutherson, or King Gutho as he's known in the South, I rate that guy. I love him. He's always got a shit haircut. He's always doing the little King Gutho dance for a try. I love that. But I don't understand the hubbub about him. Where he's good, but I don't understand. It's either the Dally M system is fucked, which it is, don't get me wrong. I don't understand how a fullback can be getting 3 or 2 points in a Dally M vote when the team's barely winning 14-12 in defensive slugfest. Like, I get it, like the fullback can also do a lot of things defensively, which Gutho certainly does, but what the Eels really need is a guy who can, James Tedesco, Ryan Pappenhausen, and Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad, just to name some of the other teams in that top 4 area, or Latrell Mitchell. Clint Gutherson is never going to outrun or outsprint anybody. He's never going to wow you with his athleticism. And he's dealt with some pretty vicious knee injuries for the early part of his career. Like, the Eels were just a team that I think, and for the next few years, are just going to be scratching at the top and are going to be pretty good. But they're not going to win a finals game against a Raiders or a Storm or a Panthers or even the Roosters, I think, for the next 2 or 3 years, easy.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, because my opinion on the Parramatta Eels is that the last few years, they've been basically the West Tigers of the top 8. So where the West Tigers are always like on the cusp but not quite there, the Eels are on the cusp of greatness, and every year everyone's like, oh, here they come, oh, they're going to be minor premiers, or they might go all the way this year. No, they're always going to fade, in my opinion. I would first point to the fact that Gutho gets 3 points in those wins that they were toughing out, right, is because of the ineffectiveness of Mitchell Moses. Because Gutho has to pretty much play that role half the time. There's a reason that Gutho has almost as many try assists, or maybe even more try assists, than Mitchell Moses. He is the actual link between the centres and the wingers and getting that ball across the white line. So, he has been that guy and he gets the points. But I think that's an indictment of Mitchell Moses, that he should be getting those points, but he's not, because he never takes the game by the scruff of the neck. That's where Clinton Gutherson is actually standing up, is that he actually have a dig. I don't really like Gutho, to be honest with you. So when I think at the end of last season, he had a chance to maybe, it was their final game where they did lose and bowed out. Wasn't he trying real hard to get across a try line or something like that and lost the ball over the try line? Or it was just suck shit. Honestly, suck shit, Gutho. I'm sick of your little dance. Fuck off. But Mitchell Moses has never been clutch. I think, he's all cocky and confident when the going's easy. But when it's tough, watch him go missing. I just don't think he's got it to be a game-changing halfback. He's middle of the road for me. And then, 100%, their backs had a regression of 2019 to 2020. I think Ferguson crossed for one try or something, did nothing. Sivo was not the same guy he was in 2019. Their centres were never lighting the world on fire. I actually do like Wonga Blake at times because he can be super dangerous, but I am very aware of his failings. And then now, of course, they've lost Michael Jennings, right? So there was a guy that actually was a bit of a breath of fresh air for them many, many times. Like he had a bit of a career resurgence kind of in 2020, and now he's gone. And their replacements are either Michael Oldfield or Tom Opacek. And I do like Oldfield. He's a Raiders man for the last few years, and I think he's been Mr. Fix-It. Comes in, scores tries on demand. But there's a reason he's been at like 5 or 6 clubs in his career. It's because he's just not quite up to scratch for a first-grade starting centre position or wing position. He is a big body, and so I think he'll be the guy they go for in the centres, but he could be their Achilles heel. So I think the backs are not looking that good. And then realistically, if you have a look at the ins and outs of the Eels, for a team that based themselves on having this really good forward pack last year, I think they have gone backwards. And so the one thing that was kind of setting them up for success, I think, has gone backwards. So they've actually lost some of their top 17 to 20 players, primarily in the forwards. Kane Evans, that Andrew Davey fellow was in the top 17 for the end of last year. Alvaro used to be. He went on exchange to the Warriors. Then they also had Penny Terapo. Brad Takarangi was one of their top 17 and 20 players as well. Gower had a few games, I believe, last year. So they actually lost a good chunk of at least their secondary forward pack. So who's covering this stuff now? And you look at their ends and you go, it's not fucking Bryce Cartwright. I don't mind Keegan Hipgrave and Isaiah Papali'i. He could be a pretty good one. I believe he's actually a front rower though, so I think they're pretty set there. So it's like they haven't improved, and I think it's gone backwards. And so if the Eels are thinking that this current team, with the recruiting they've done, is going to improve on a third place finish, I very much doubt it.
Yeah, you almost took the words out of my mouth there, where all of those signings are pretty solid, we'll say. Like, they're definitely not negative signings, But you do look at the predicted lineup that NRL.com have been starting to spit out slowly, and of all those guys that they brought in, I'm looking at it now, the only guy that they have in the starting 13 from those guys, and I can't believe this, is going to be Tom Opacek, which I don't know if anybody has seen Tom Opacek play footy. He's not a very good, he's not an NRL level footy player. But then on top of that, they've got Isaiah Papali'i, we playing 16. But everybody else on that list is just in the others, so they're providing it as depth. And that's my issue with all these signings, is that there's nobody there that truly makes me think that the Parramatta Eels are going to take the next step. And it makes me believe, whether this is for good or for bad, that the Parramatta Eels are so sure that they have this, the 7 or probably the 20 to 25 guys on the roster ready to compete. But I need to be seeing progression from, and let's even say right now, right? Like Clint Gutherson was the consensus. What was he? He was Dally M fullback of the year, wasn't he? Yeah, he was. So the best fullback in the NRL, the Parramatta Eels own already. So already there, where Gutho needs to be, he needs to stay at his that position, which was 17 tries, 10 tries, 2020 season. But then they now need Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses. Mitchell Moses more than Dylan Brown, because old Dillbags is certainly about 20 years old, and he has been dealing with, I think he's had a chronic back issue for a few years now. I think he had to spend 5 games out last year,
and that is because he does tackle like a madman. He's probably the best. Well, not the best defensive 5'8" in the competition, because that's Jack Whiten, but probably the second best, and he's 20. So he's a good guy to have, but if he's having back problems now, that's a real issue.
Yeah, and with Moses, Brown spent a lot of the end of this regular season out. He came back for the Storm game. Obviously, they got trounced. And then Moses missed 3 games in the middle of the season with a calf complaint. But you could tell when he came back, he just wasn't quite right. He was missing kicks from the sideline, and you could tell that he couldn't get all of the weight into that plant foot that he wanted. I think moving forward for the Eels, like the issue that's going to sort of like hurt them is you think of the way that their side is built and the way like a Melbourne Storm side is built, right? Where you have two damaging, mitigating wingers, nuffy centers who just do enough of a job because you're two halves who primarily for the Storm, it's always been a game controlling, very, by the X's and O's halfback, and then a 5'8" that can kind of switch things up a little bit, like sort of change the pace. Munster, Jerome Hughes, big forward pack that just dominates the ruck, time of possession, and then a pretty decently sized bench. That's the Storm and the Eels, like both ways. But the issue with them is with their halves is both Moses and Dylan Brown. Neither of them have either taken that step or want to become the guy that does the gritty, boring work. And I see Mitchell Moses being able to do more of that only because Dylan Brown is just a little bit not faster. Moses has some fucking speed on him, but it takes him a while to get going. So there's been a few times where he gets an intercept and it looks like he's going to get caught, and then he just like starts to sort of take away. Whereas Dylan Brown is very much just quick. And like ask Luke Keary how quick he is. That chase down tackle he did on him last year to save a try was absolutely phenomenal. Moses needs to just not be flashy anymore, I think. And that's the hard part for him, I think, is like you brought it up. He's like the Chihuahua of NRL halfbacks, where when the game's going well and the Parramatta Eels forwards are absolutely smashing through and the backs running the right lines and they're up, you've never seen a bloke look like he's having more fun playing footy. Like he's cocky, he's talking shit, he's just getting into it and getting involved. But as soon as the Parramatta Eels don't have any, like either the middle isn't gaining enough meters or the backs are getting like rushed up on quickly, and then he needs to do something more than just what's on the game script, he just fucking shatters, and then teams get under his skin. He starts to miss kicks. He starts to just struggle doing like the simple things. He needs to really take this step this year because he's getting a fair bit of money too, where the Eels are going to have much more of a leash on Dylan Brown than they are Mitchell Moses, because it's a lot easier to find an older veteran like a Benji Marshall, let's say, who can just sit into that number 7 role, and he's happy. He doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. That he can just, control the kicking game, give it to the forwards, give some advice, like know when Dylan Brown needs to take the line on and when he doesn't need to. Because really, that's where I think this is like where the X factor is for me for the Eels, is just simply the Haas partnership. Because on paper, there's nowhere else that I see a player really truly underperforming to the point where they need to upgrade them outside of the centers and the halves. Because Regan Campbell-Gillard had a career year. Reid Marnie is good. Junior Paulo is fantastic at what he does. Like that right there. So you've got the 2 New South Wales props, if I'm not mistaken. Or if Campbell-Gillard didn't play for New South Wales, he was definitely in the train-on side and has played New South Wales before. So there you go. So 2 Origin forwards, right? Sean Lane, not the best player, but in terms of like what they need him to do, very, very good. Ryan Madison, fucking gun. Nathan Brown, Origin player, fucking gun. That forward pack there, that's ready to be used right now, right? Like the Moses needs to figure out how to use these forwards the best way, and rather than them just scraping out these like narrow victories, like start winning games 24-6 or 18-10, like these games where like the score looks close, but then if you watch the game or you watch the highlights, the Eels were just keeping them at bay the whole time, because that's how the team is built to operate. But Mitchell Moses just doesn't have it in him right now to you don't have to be winning games 50-0 or 40-0. Like you can win a game 20-8 and just for 20 minutes just get to the end of your set, put a really nice kick into the corner and just defend. Because the Melbourne Storm have been doing that for a fair few years now, and it's been working pretty well, right? But the thing is that I don't see the Eels being able to do it, and I don't see Mitchell Moses being able to become because he loves the spotlight. Like he's this, I fucking hate Mitchell Moses. He's such a little cocky fuck. The way that he flicks his hair every time he makes a fucking conversion, he gets the 3 or 4 fingers and flicks it across like that, thinking that he's top shit. When in reality, like you're not even a top 5 halfback in the NRL. Like you're not even close. And I would if it was an option now between Tom Dearden and Mitchell Moses at the Broncos, Mitchell Moses can fuck off. He can fuck right off.
Mitchell Moses needs to do 2 things. The first one is have a shag. The second one is do something other than kick the ball. Because some people might say especially in response to my point before about Gutho having equal or more try assists, that is also including the fact that Mitchell Moses pretty much gets all of his try assists from kicks. And he does it against teams they're putting a belting on. Mm-hmm. So this isn't in the game where they won 12-10 over, or the 14-10 over the Panthers. No, sir. This is the 40-10 drubbing of the Dragons, let's say. That's when he's getting his try assists off the boot. So if Mitchell Moses can do something other than fucking kick the ball for a try, maybe set up a few people with some good ball play and running some lines, running some plays, fucking all power to him. Maybe they can improve. But until I see that from him and from the Parramatta Eels, I don't see them improving. That's the X factor for me. Mitchell Moses, is he going to get better? Is he going to be the same old Mitchell Moses? So I have them as the 4th place finishers for the regular season, and then another swift West Tigers of the top 8 exit from the finals.
Very tidy. I like the thinking. I went a little bit lower. I went 7th. The reason why is because towards the end of the season, I saw doubt rising in the Parramatta Eels team, and that game against the Storm, they did really well. I think they were out 18-6 or 20-6 or something like that, and the Storm just, as they do, the Storm getting a little bit of a roll, and they were just absolutely transient. It finished, I think, 36-20 the following week again. Started out the game really well against the Rabbits. Gutho, in the space of 5 or 10 minutes, scored a try and set up 2, or scored 2 and set up 1, which was funny because my Rabbitohs fan page was going in this big detailed analysis of how you don't need a fullback in the modern NRL. And for 10 minutes, King Gutho was absolutely fucking tearing him to pieces. And then they came back down to earth, as the Parramatta Eels always do. They started out the season 8-2. So after 10 rounds, they were second, only behind the Panthers, who were they were the only team to beat the Panthers in the regular season. But I don't see them being able to start off that hot this time around. I don't see them being able to even remotely touch the top teams. So I think they're going to finish 7th, and they're going to have a pretty similar looking season to what they did last year, but without the 8 out of 10 wins to start the season, which is going to bring them back down to 7th. And then from there, it's there's just, unless Mitchell Moses can take a monumental leap this season, or Dylan Brown can, I don't know who, they just seem to be the team that, like you said, that when they're versing a team that they match up against better, they give them a good dicking. And that's what you want. You never want to lose. You never want to lose the games that you should be winning. But then the issue is that when there comes to games where you're like, they're probably going to lose this, they do it. But they do it in the worst way possible, because against a Storm, they're ahead in the finals, then they end up losing. And they do the same thing against Rabbitohs, where they're ahead at the start and then they end up losing. That to me shows that there's a lack of composure and leadership in the group. There's issues with the half, because if you're up 2 converted tries to the Melbourne Storm, you should be able to, I'm not saying that like you should be lamented for it, but the Sydney Roosters get up to a 12-point lead against you, and they make it very, very difficult to come back. If you get 12 points behind the Storm, unless you're the Penrith Panthers in the grand final, they make it nearly impossible, because they take away the things that you're good at. Whereas Mitchell Moses in that second half just absolutely capitulated. And then the same thing happened. I think Josh Adokar scored a pretty good try in that game, because it was just poor kicking and just poor decision making. And anytime you're up more than 1 try, you should win that game. Like, you should just win that game, because you've done enough to get to that point, so just maintain it. The Eels don't have that ability to do it. They either fucking blow you out, or they're hanging on by the fucking skin of their teeth. So it's 7th for me.
All right, now that that's wraps on the first 5 episodes of our season preview series, that also brings us to our very first installment of, our topics and issues facing rugby league series. We've got plenty of these planned for you guys, and we're kind of starting with a bit of a softball here, to be honest. It was just our way to work our way into it. Plus, it's probably the most pertinent thing to talk about off the bat when talking about a new season of rugby league. So today, we're talking about the new rules. There's been a number of new rules released for 2021. However, primarily they're building off the back of the rules that were brought in 2020, because there were some substantial rule changes brought in 2020. So I just quickly wanted to touch on those.
and see what we thought and see what you thought, Spencer, of some of these rules. So I guess the big one was the 6-again rule. So what did you think of that one?
Well, I liked it. It's sort of going with the theme at the moment the NRL has, where they want to make the game a little bit more, like a bit faster, like flow a little bit more. And also as well, I think it sort of brings in the new breed of athlete that we're trying to sort of like, you know, like center around like the game of rugby league, where if you're faster and you're fitter, then you're going to be rewarded with this, like, you know, 6-game, because there's less time to sort of like, you know, to catch your breath and to sort of rest. So, you know, we spoke about it like before the podcast, you know, a guy's like Payne Haas is like a guy like Payne Haas 10, 15 years ago would have got belted by guys like Webke. But now guys like Webke, or, you know, like who's a big forward, you know.
Asafa Solomona is one that comes to mind.
Exactly, you know, like absolutely massive, like nearly, you know, 2 meters tall, like 125 kilos. But now, like, he's going to have to start trimming back in order to sort of like fall in line with it. And we even saw a guy like last year, Andrew Fafita, who really struggled with his playing weight, which caused him some knee issues. And he's even come out and said in the off season that he's been his active pursuit to get trimmer and to get a little bit lighter, because he knows and he understands that if he doesn't, he's used goods. And like that's what I think the game is trying to like move in with the 6-again rule. What I will say is that what they decided to be a 6-again and like the discretion of like when is something 6-again and when is something a penalisable offence is always going to be in the back of my mind. But I think that's something that's going to be too hard in a game like rugby league. That's so like it's not as stop-start or static as some of the other sports that we enjoy watching, like the NFL. So many things happen in a split-second decision. So, you know, a referee could see somebody with their, you know, their hand in a playable like a ruck infringement, and, you know, it could just be them being lazy, not getting up quick enough. Okay, that's 6-again. But then, like, what if they're down 2 points and he does that 20 meters out and he calls 6-again? Like, when should that be a penalty and they should have the opportunity to kick for 2? And when should they allow them to keep rolling on? And that, I just think, is the only thing that I have against it. But that is something that I think is just, you know, sort of, you know, picking hairs. I was like splitting hairs over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the refs need to learn a little bit more, situational awareness and context, and I'll mention that with the new rule that's coming for 2021 shortly. But yeah, definitely agree. It's going to see the fall of those big boppers like your Lodges and your Asafa Solomonas, and it's seen the continued rise already of your Haases and your Tarpanies and even like your Cameron Murrays and like the smaller forwards, right? So I love it. I love the flow of the game. I love the fast pace. Brings more of that fatigue factor in. Plus, it also puts more of a distance between us and rugby union. It's always good to get further away from that stop-start bullshit that rugby union has when all day long for, you know, penalty kicks and scrums. So I definitely agree.
And yeah, I think as well it's going to be interesting to see how that sort of plays into, you know, what will the number 13 jersey look like in 5 years' time, like if these rules continue to sort of play on. And like, you know, the NRL, like either for the benefit or the detriment of the game, loves to tinker around with their rules. And another one they brought out last year that I think was, I mean, watching American sports was horrendously overdue, was the captain's challenge. Like, so many sports have the opportunity and the ability, not the captains in some sports, it's normally the coaches that have the chance, like in the NFL, they throw the red challenge flag and they have a look at it. But now we brought in this new rule this year that the captain, if they wanted to, they had 10 seconds of leeway after the incident happened to either ask referee yes, we'd like this challenged, or no, and then the captain would decide what would be challenged. I'm indifferent on it. Like, I'm either all for or against, but like, Alex, like, what do you think? Like, do you think the captain's challenge was a good thing to bring into the game? And then, like, B, do you think it was done well by the NRL?
Yeah, 100%. Like, Spencer and I, we're both big fans of the NFL, who have had the coaches challenge for a very long time. Like, they love, their technology and getting their officiating right, which apparently the NRL does not give a shit about, to be honest with you. But they're just apologising about it every single week. So the captain's challenge was a really great addition to make sure that we got a couple of errors out where possible. Obviously it's good that if you are successful, you get another challenge, which is great. So brought us closer to the NFL. I'd love to see it go even further to a coach's challenge. I would honestly love to see, just those monumental stuff-ups that cost teams games and finals berths and grand finals, as we all know, get rubbed out of the game. And no longer can there be whinging either from the fans or, of course, the coaches in the press conferences after games, and just trying to hush it all away and dismiss it all over one call. Ricky Stewart, I'll say, is even one of the worst ones that always has a bit of a blow up. Albeit, I think most of the time he's fucking fair enough. Like, the bullshit that can decide games is really bad. So, Captain's Challenge is great, and there's also a lot of strategy involved in it as well too. Like, when to use it, when not to use it. If you use it now, you won't get it later in a more pivotal moment. And there's something so funny when a front rower swears black and blue that he's been stripped or something like this, and then the whole stadium just glues their eyes to the big screen and watches this front rower make an absolute dickhead of himself when there was no hands anywhere near that ball.
Oh, that's it. That's the old Guthy Gould. Fucking bread and butter right there. The prop asked for the challenge. You mean ask Fabs, should he do it? Should he trust him? It's a prop. How the props doing this year? They're very good. But no, it's it was long overdue, that rule change. I would like to see a few changes to it that sort of mirror a bit more towards the American sports. Like, I think they should probably get 2 challenges. It's an 80-minute game. A lot of things can stuff up like throughout the whole thing. And I also think there should be some kind of rule put into place where maybe in the last 5 to 10 minutes of each half, maybe the last 5 minutes of each half, it goes to captain's challenges aren't allowed anymore, but anything that is challengeable will be done by the booth upstairs. And I think there are just too many instances, like you said, Alex, where, one that comes to mind is State of Origin 2014, 2013, when Queensland were going for 9 straight. Aaron Woods, the ball hits him on the chest as he's trying to move away from it. His feet were inbound, the ball hits the chest, and it goes across. The referee didn't see it that way. He goes, that ball was kicked out on the full. It's a penalty at the 50-metre line to New South Wales. While the New South Wales team were going to the 50-metre line, everybody in the stadium could see on the big screen that it had hit Andrew Wood's chest and that it should actually be a dropout and Queensland's ball, and there was nothing they could do about it. So in that situation, if the captain's challenge was available, Cameron Smith could have gone to the referee, yeah, mate, please check that. Can we please have a look at that? And they'd do it, and, it'll be fair. We can get into this, we can do this, but there are, that is definitely something that I'm glad is in the game now, because it just allows, like you said, anytime we can have a chance to sort of rectify a fuck up that the referees have done. They've got a tough job, particularly with them only being 1 last year. They had to get rid of 2 because of COVID and money issues. It's a tough gig to have. Just give them a break. They wouldn't hate the captain's challenges. They would love them.
And what do you think of the 2040 kick? I don't think we saw it. Did we see it?
Yeah, I thought it was a good rule. I think it's a rule that if you're actually trying to exploit it, could actually be a very good thing to use. You think of the scenario, you're getting absolutely belted for the first 3 tackles and you're not even outside of your 20. That means that you're probably not going to be outside of your 30, right, by the time you get to your 5th tackle. On the 3rd tackle, if you see that the fullback is standing up or that the wingers aren't set into position, have a crack. If you're outside, if you're outside backs and players know there's going to be a kick and they chase it hard, you're going to be able to tackle them around the halfway to the 40 or 30 anyway. And best case, it goes out, you get a rest and a new set of 6. Yeah. I don't think we did see it, but I think that's been the case with the 40-20 for years and years now as well. I think it's one of those things where we don't there aren't kickers that trust themselves enough. Where when we used to play rugby league live too, I'd flat out go for a 40-20 every fucking set because the reward in that game outweighed the risk, and I think it would as well in the NRL if a team actively went after it. If they say, okay, every single kick we're going for this game, we're going to try to get a 40-20 or a 20-40, I think they'd come off with more. But it's that thing where it's normally a desperation play where, you go for it when all the chips are on the table and you need something. So when it comes off, you're like, fuck yes, we get a new set. But then if you don't, you get ridiculed and your forwards are up your ass because now they've got to chase down early in the tackle count, early in their set and then tackle again. And normally they're doing it when they're tired and they're already ragged. So I think, if a team was smart enough to exploit the rule, it'd be great.
And there's been some good examples of that kind of, outside the box thinking to use these rules. Probably not the same, but similar is, of course, when the Ipswich Jets started using the short kickoff. So it's, convention in NRL has been to get the ball as far away from your try line as possible and hold them down there. Whereas, the Ipswich Jets were in favour of just get the ball in our hands and we'll score the try. So that was really exciting to see, and this has the potential to be that. But I think at the end of the day, in a top-tier competition like the NRL, the risk far outweighs the reward, particularly because if you are pinned inside your 20, you've got defence up in your face. Like, they are bum rushing you, right? So you're probably just struggling to get the 2 or 3 metres of gain, let alone the space that's required to get a kick away. You'd be ended up doing this kick to be successful at it. You'd have to be doing this kick from inside your 10-metre line. So it's more like a 10-40, which is a significantly more difficult kick. So I think the risk outweighs the reward. And even if you miss it at the end of the day, you've now gifted your opposition ball inside your set, a full set of 6 inside your half, and likely starting in broken play. Like, you better hope that your team is aware and is fitter and better defensively than the opposition is in broken play attack. So big risks there, I think. So, I can understand why we didn't see it too much, but good to see him trying some stuff. And if somebody pulls it off this season, I'm sure it will be exciting.
Yeah, I will say, the last little touching point on that is I think, and I might cop a bit of flack for this, but I think the reason why the 2040 wasn't as game-breaking as it could have been is because we don't have the players talented enough to exploit the rule. I don't think that there's a halfback or 5'8" or any player out there that is genuinely dedicated to their craft enough to hammer this thing out, because you think about it and all those risks make a lot of sense. But if you're so sure of yourself that that if you're inside your own 20 that you can hammer that thing and get it over the 40, you do it. And you'd look like a hero, because so many times you'd be stuck in your own set and you can just belt it. And even then, it was a 20-40, right? So that means that if it's 20-40, then even if you're still going, well, the 40-20 still exists. So it's the same kick, right? It's the exact same kick. You can do it. But it's just for me, there's not any halfback around that trusts themselves enough to be able to consistently pull it off. But with that said, I think one thing that I thoroughly enjoyed this year was the change to the scrums and actually being able to position where you wanted the scrum to take place. If I'm not mistaken, it was at midfield or 10 and 20 metres inside the touchline. What did you think of it?
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but not necessarily a game changer. So, I won't spend too much time on it. I think it did open up both sides of the scrum potentially for more potent attack, but most teams did adapt quite well. I can't really think of too many crazy scrum, tries or anything like that. So I think it was about as per standard, and it does kind of get rid of that little blindside play that I think a lot of us did love. When you could use it effectively. You might go to the open side for a scrum 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, and then that 1 time out of 100 that you do a little blindside play, exciting footy. So I think, if you set up on the 10-metre line these days, you're pretty much advertising a potential blindside play. So it's not as effective now. So I thought it was okay. Not too excited about it.
Oh, well, yeah, I think it's I liked it, and I just think any time that we can add a little bit more, tactics or a little bit of nuances into the game, I think that's always good, because although that blindside play has kind of been a bit of a victim to it, it is I like it where, when done correctly, teams can set up a set of 6 just by sort of deciding where they want the scrum to be. And, if they put it on the 10-metre line, on the right side, then they can do a lot of short plays on that right side, and then that opens up the left, so then they can do this nice long sweeping play to the left. Or if they just want to, towards the end of the game, they're trying to get into field goal position or something like that, they can just chuck it straight bang in the middle and just slowly work their way up through the middle. So it's, and what was it as well in Origin, I think, was it, who was it? Was it, I think it was us, when we were watching the Origin, we were talking about the numbers. New South Wales just constantly had the numbers on us in the scrums. But then Andrew Johns actually made a good point, one of the few times he has made a good point on commentary, that when with your halfback, it's so difficult to have, with the attacking halfback, it's hard to have the numbers right on both sides, because your halfback isn't allowed to move until the attacking halfback picks up the ball and then keeps on moving with it. So it created that indecisiveness where you could potentially have yourself a 3-on-2 or a 4-on-3 overlap every single scrum if you like set it up right. And like that to me, I think with how bullshit the scrums have become, like, you know, they just essentially throw the ball. Like I think it was maybe the Roosters Tigers semi-final was the last time I saw somebody win a scrum against the feed that wasn't like somebody just monumentally cocking it up. This was actually like a team pushing against the feed and getting it. Scrums now are really just a set play almost. So if you can make those set plays a little bit more fun, I rate it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'd rather just see the scrums removed completely from the game, and I think we are moving that direction. A couple more years maybe. If you're not going to push, it's just not worth it, to be honest. Now, the final one that I want to talk about from 2020, and this one's pretty close to my bloody heart, is the ball strikes the trainer or referee, you replay the ball. It really grinds my gears, this rule, because of the reason why it exists. The rule was created pretty much to justify what happened in the 2019 grand final, because they want to create a more clear rule now for the attacking team going forward. For me, this was arguably the worst call from the Roosters Raiders grand final, because it was more pivotal earlier in the game and what I thought was actually probably a clearer outcome of what would have happened. So just to recap on what happened there. So Elliott Whitehead charged down a football that was being kicked by the Roosters on tackle 5 at the halfway mark. It goes rocketing back towards the Roosters goal line, looking like it was easily going to sit around the 10 to 20 metre line, with Elliott Whitehead the only person within cooey of that football. Now, as you know, it stuck the Roosters trainer, preventing that from happening. The Roosters trainer shouldn't have even been there, but I digress. More importantly, in the old rule of for this, the play was to be stopped and awarded to the attacking team in the form of a scrum. This was deemed to be the Roosters. So from a charge down kick that hit a Roosters trainer, the Roosters get a fresh set of 6. Are you fucking kidding me? It was fucking unbelievably bad in 2 clear-cut ways. First and foremost, according to the rules, the Roosters were no longer the attacking team. When the 6th tackle is reached, you choose whether you want to pass, run, kick, whatever. It's pretty common that most people kick the ball because, you know, otherwise you're going to be gifting them the ball wherever you have it, particularly when you're within your own 50-metre zone. So naturally, most teams opt for the kick. This means once boot hits ball, the team has conceded possession to the opposing team. That makes it Raiders ball. As soon as it hit the foot of the player from the Roosters team, it makes it Raiders ball, particularly because Elliott Whitehead was the last to contact the ball. The ball's heading the direction of the Raiders' attack, thus making the ball in their favour. So in how many ways are the Raiders the attacking team here? Every fucking way. And then they got the call wrong. And it should have resulted, in my opinion, in 6 points to the Raiders in the most likely scenario, especially if the trainer isn't there. And at the very least, it should have been Raiders ball at the spot of the foul. So for me, this one's just doubling down on an incorrect ruling. So now if something like this happens again, that team gets another play of the ball. If the ball hits the referee, sure, that makes sense. But in the unlikely event of another Roosters trainer incident, it's just not solving the issue for me. So fuck that call.
Yeah, you weren't kidding about not mentioning that 2019 grand final, were you? Yeah, it's, and we'll... Like following on to, the rule change that we have for this year, I think the NRL definitely has a bit of an issue with, maybe shaking things up for the sake of having something to shake. Like, we'll start off with I think the most stupid rule change in the past in the past year, going back to that hitting the ball with the trainer. The introduction of a 2-point field goal for kicks taken from more than 40 metres out. Kind of spoke about it with the 20-40 and the 40-20. I don't really think that we have the athletes to do it. And also a footy, if anybody's tried, is actually pretty fucking hard to kick consistently. But Alex, I'll get your opinion on this. Are you for the 2-point field goal when a player kicks it from 40 metres out, or are you against it?
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. But it could also be another 20-40 rule, yeah. I mean, I just imagine a team being 2 behind and snapping a field goal from 50 out to force extra time. Like, it would just be insane. Or, alternatively, you're down by 1 and you chance your hand and take that extra, that golden point 2-pointer. It would just be insane to win a game like that. You know, keep an eye on a Felt or a Pappenhausen to try this sort of thing because they could 100% do it. But you're right, maybe not every player could.
My tip, one player and one player only will make the kick this year from 40 metres out. It'll be Latrell Mitchell, and it'll be to win the fucking game. He'll do it with about 4 minutes to go in a game. They'll be down 1. He'll blast it from 40 metres out, and he'll fucking smack it through the eyes. But other than that, it'll be a shit rule.
Yeah, you're right. Latrell Mitchell can fucking sling him, that's for sure. So again, there was another small change to the 60-gram rule, which is now going to be done for 10-metre infringements. So that one's, whatever. More 60 again, faster flow. That could be cool. But the one I do want to ask you about, mate, is the play the ball for kicks over the touchline or plays over the touchline. That's a bit of a game changer.
Yeah, so again, the NRL's way to try to increase the flow of the game and the speed of it, and also as well, I think it's been long overdue with like scrums just aren't what they used to be, and I think, like you said, you made a good point. Like anything that we can do to kind of distance ourselves from rugby union is probably just best for both codes. I think it'll be interesting to see again, like how do teams abuse this? You know what I mean? Like how do teams like get the most like value for money out of this? And it's going to be interesting now because it could like it can either work in the way where a team that's going to be getting absolutely belted would normally in the past have a smart halfback or a kicker, kick the ball into touch, give themselves a little bit of a breather. You get 30 or 40 seconds, sort of like get ready. Teams can fuck around packing the scrum, and then you go on. That's not there anymore now, right? So teams need to be fitter. They need to be, controlling the game in a much more manageable way. And it's kind of needs to make kicking a little bit more accurate, right? Because now the most valuable kick is one that sits up in the in goal or sits up inside the 20-metre zone somewhere, or like just near the sideline. Because now if it goes out, that play of the ball is just a much easier, like a much quicker thing to sort of get off. So I think this is something where, again, seems to be a lot of rules, but if teams are willing to, abuse it, I think it's going to be a great rule. But I think overall, it's just going to be something where it'll be something that will be picked up very quickly. And I don't think that we'll notice it being a new rule after about 5 or 6 rounds, because we'll just enjoy not having to constantly fuck around waiting for scrums and teams wasting time and teams having to pack scrums or not packing scrums and the bullshit of, if you want to pack a scrum, you can't have your halfback leave now that he's in there and all that sort of fucking bull jive.
Yeah, look, I just like imagine it now, like in the late stages of a game when normally, whoever's in the lead, does all this clock management bullshit and it just kind of takes the wind out of the sails of what could be a really exciting finish. So I just imagine it for like, a team who's down, it's late in the game and they just manage to get the ball back in play, quickly play it, and they turn what was a potential managing the clock situation into a really nail-biting finish or a slim victory. Grab the ball, play it, and off we go. So I think that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to that one. Just quick games of footy. The other one, which was sneaky for us, right? We didn't know that this became a proper rule. We knew that it got trialled in the last the last game of last season. But the bunker will now be reviewing replays after every on-field try. So before a conversion attempt can happen, it will be looked at. So I'm not sure if this actually means that we're just getting rid of video referee totally. It just gets reviewed automatically. But I love it.
Halla fucking Luya. This has been the rule that has, like, any sporting code that has refused to bring this type of stuff over has just found themselves getting far and far behind. It is honestly the best way to keep everybody happy. Where now, I am interested to see how it goes with the video ref. Maybe it is that thing now where, if it's a very, touchy call, we're just going to go to the video ref. But my thing is, we haven't seen too many. I think there was one last year, and I think that's what kind of made the rule go in. I think it was the Rabbitohs game where they called a try for somebody and he dropped it.
I think it was Paulo, and was it when he put his foot over the sideline?
Yes, that one. And they cocked it. They cocked it monumentally because it looked like a try, it smelt like a try, and it acted like a try. So they gave it a try. And then it wasn't until about a minute and a half afterwards that they all commentated, and you heard the crowd just go, "What?" And it was no try. This is this is what the NRL does though. A 1 in 1,000, 1 in 1 million thing happens. and they've changed the rule. But the thing is now is that like the referee's job has become so much easier because it's like now if it looks like a try, he can just go, yep, it's a try. And now what the rule is the goal kicker will get ready, he'll get the conversion, but he's not allowed to take the conversion until the bunker gives the all clear to the referee that it's a try. And all that'll happen there is the referee will just go to the guy kicking the ball, kick the ball. If it might not be a try, they'll go, hold on a second, the bunker's having a look. So it's now not the referee anymore. It's not the referee going to the video ref and then wasting more time. The bunker's just doing it straight away. My thing would be if I'm a referee, again, with how to do this, anything that looks like a try, just call it. Just call it. Because it's not like you're never going to get in trouble for calling something a try and giving the bunker a chance to look at it and the bunker just agree. Like, I'd rather them just call everything a try, and then if it's the most blatant non-try in the world, no try. Play the ball. Done. Rather than video ref, benefit of the doubt, inconclusive, yada, yada, yada. That's the only thing I can see might be the issue. How do we play with the refs? If you can't see the ball and the ref has called it, to the video ref, does he go, video ref, no try, have a look, and because it's no try, they go with that? Or is it just it's a try on the field, we was called a try, so we're just going to give it? I don't know, but either way, just makes the most amount of sense. The game will flow so much better, and there's honestly no downside to this rule. Anybody that complains about this rule, his last name is probably Rodonigus, and he's probably still living in the 80s. That would be my only guess. Or maybe Gus Gould might be pissed off because he's got to listen to the bunker for 10 more seconds instead of just spurting shit.
I think this is just going to improve the quality of rugby league all round. I think particularly at the start of last season, I don't think you could go around without popping onto social media to watch, the NRL's post about the highlights from a certain game, and just the comments are just, if it's any indication of what the public is feeling about rugby league, people must have been turning off in droves, because comment after comment was just, we're ruining the game of rugby league. How can you get it so wrong, so biased? There was honestly at least a game, if not 2 or 3 games, every round for the first half of last season where there was just something atrociously bad called in a game that often decided an outcome, or at least a pivotal part. So anything that improves the legitimacy of the outcomes of games and makes it unquestionable about the results is honestly an improvement, and hopefully we can get these fans that are having a whinge back on board. So I think it's awesome. I'd even like to see it go further in the future, where maybe even a video referee can jump in for a really blatant mistake in a pivotal part of rugby league games. This goes to my context and situational awareness point that I made earlier. If there's a break in play, for an example, and you look back and see that there was a knock-on or an infringement or something in that play, call it. Why not? Yeah. I'm not saying stop the game, because that's the opposite of what we want to have happen. But, I mean, if you keep playing on, keep the game rolling, and then the video referee just quickly notices as something that the whole world's seeing, we're all seeing it on our TV, the commentators are seeing it, everyone's seeing it, we may as well get the game back to where that happened, because everyone's just going to whinge about it. Just bring it back and just say, look, guys, unfortunately we saw a knock-on in that play the ball. So I know we've just gone an extra 30 metres down the field and you had a attacking opportunity, but you didn't deserve it. According to the letter of the law of rugby league, that was a knock-on, and we're going to go back to it. Why not?
Yeah, it's something that is it's the pro of the game of rugby league, and the con is its fast-flowing nature, where it you think of a certain scenario, right? Though, let's say somebody bobbles the ball and play the ball on 5th tackle, or so. I'd say even on 2nd tackle, right? And it's a blatant knock-on, and the video ref sees it, and then it gets to 3rd, 4th, 5th tackle, and then they kick it to the other team, and the other team grabs it, and then they run it up, and they go, hang on a second, we just got to look at this for a second. They pull it back, and then they find out, actually, we were wrong. There is no knock-on there. It's play on. So now it's a play on from 1st tackle, and that team that had a roll on from a kick return now has to go from a stop start against a set defensive line. That's where I could see there being an issue. But like you said, the bunker doesn't have one TV to look at. They have every angle they can look at. I reckon there should be a rule, and there's a bit of conjecture in the Premier League at the moment with this sort of stuff over in England with all the soccer or football, for those who don't know, where a lot of goals will happen or a lot of things will happen, and then they'll call the play up for something that happened a minute and a half ago, like an inconsequential handball that the referee was never going to call. The VAR, so video something review or something like that, he goes back and he goes, oh, actually, there was a handball 90 seconds like pass in back play. It's no goal. And obviously people are losing their minds. So that's bullshit. Like, that was a goal. Like, he scored the goal. It shouldn't be. It was like, but it's not, though, because they broke the rules. Like, I'd be happy with that sort of stuff where, like, maybe there's, like, an absolute limit where it's, like, it has to be done within 2 sets. And, like, let's say, like, somebody, like, egregiously knocks the ball on and they get away with it, but then it gets the fourth tackle and the video ref just goes to the ref. It's like, no, he knocked it on, mate. Take it back to the 10. It's Melbourne's ball. Call the game off. Yeah, boys, like, go back down here. Like, don't reset the clock. I don't really give a fuck about resetting the clock. Like, that's fine. Just, like, play on. Or if you want to, reset 20 seconds onto the clock and play on. But then the thing is that, like, there's, like, everybody, and we're included, hates a particular fucking rule or something when it fucks your team over. But the minute that rule fucks another team over that's versing your team, you love it. And they always say, like, you can't complain about, like, shit calls because every dog has its day and every team gets a shit call. Well, how about we just do that every team gets the right call? Let's make the right call. Not like, like everyone's going to fuck up. No, let's make the right call and stop thinking that slowing the game up for 20 seconds to do the right thing. It's like, what's the point of having the rule book if we don't adhere to it, if we don't obey it? Just do it that way.
That's just what it boils down to. Exactly that. Like, if you are going to allow for the flow of play to continue at the detriment of getting the game right, the game's outcome, pivotal moments, knock-ons, infringements, if you're going to let it flow, then people are going to be mad. How can you get mad if you get pinged or your team gets pinged for something that was rightfully able to be pinged? Like, if you get dragged back after scoring a try because your team made a knock-on 3 tackles earlier, fair enough. How can you argue with that? It's like, well, just because the referees on the field missed it doesn't mean you automatically get a try. We have the technology, and the technology showed you knocked it on. It's not a try. At the end of the day, nobody can argue with that. You can't argue with that because it's following the true letter of the law of the game of rugby league. So I think that we can go that route later, but this is a good step in the right direction. One more from two more. Yes, 2 more from this year's new set of rules. Before we actually pose some that we'd like to see in our fantasy of the best game of rugby league. The first one being injured players will be interchanged if a trainer asks for play to be stopped. What do you reckon?
I think it's definitely a rule that had to be tinkered with a little bit because the trainers obviously are being given certain words, certain tips by their coaches, sort of like try to slow the game down. But my thing is like we've seen it before where like a player's been really, really badly concussed or like, knocked out or like not even that, like, like someone's blown their knee out or like they've done something really bad and like they're trying to like, get the game stopped. But like the referee's always kind of this thing where like they're not really sure like what's going on. A trainer's job as a medical professional is to kind of know if something is good or something is bad. But in the heat of the moment, they're obviously going to lean more towards like, if we slow the game down while we're in dramas, we can actually get advantage out of this. But now if they know that player has to be like sort of interchanged, then it makes all the sense in the world, right? If you know that your guy is like, he's knocked out and he's got like the jelly hands and he's trying to pick himself off the ground or his knee is facing sideways. Like one for me is Corey Oates. When Corey Oates did his leg and it looked like his leg just exploded and he was literally on the green whistle immediately, they were trying to like get that thing waved off straight away. Like that's like that man needs medical attention and he needs it 5 minutes ago or 5 seconds ago. Like let's do that. But then also let's stop these teams trying to, skirt around the rules by getting either free interchanges or free stoppages in plays or just a way to reset the defensive line by somebody literally just falling over for cramp. It's like, if you've got cramp, take a fucking hike.
Yeah, and that's the biggest problem with it is that like this sort of thing and even the HIA rule, they're just being used to game the system. This is going to be a little bit controversial. I think we're going to go into it in a much deeper conversation later on in the year. But the HIA rule and the rule, regarding injuries and that sort of stuff is being gamed to get free interchanges. How many times you just like see someone pat on the head? I'm like, he didn't even get hit in the head. There was no contact with the head. So I honestly think that some certain teams who shan't be named were particularly okay with skirting the rules to use the free interchange system for HIAs. So I like that this is the opposite of that, really, which is, okay, cool. No, if you want to stop the play because you've got an injured player, that's no problems at all. We do want to take care of our players, but that player is now going off. So you're going to be that much more, wary of allowing your players to go down if it means that you now have to make like an unforced change, number one, and also reshuffle your lineup. Because how many times did we see last year a team suffer, aka lose a game, because at the end of the day, like, they just had one or two people that had left the game, HIAs, injuries, whatever, and it meant that their whole roster was reshuffled. So I think it will make some teams think twice before, let's just lay down a little bit and get the trainer to come stretch me out for a cramp or whatever in the late stages of a game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that just needed to be done. And it's, overall, it might, ruffle a few feathers at the start, but if it's has anything to do with player welfare and well-being, I think it needs to be done. Getting into the pointy end now of the rule changes for this year. Yeah, so one thing that's, is almost at the discretion of the referees these days is the incorrect play the ball. So, we've got all these terms turned around, like the ball has to pass through the gate. And, I've had mates that have done referee courses and they tell me that you don't actually have to have your foot touch the ball. It just has to be in the actual motion of it. And then, you've seen players, especially like trying to speed up the play of the ball. They're trying to, the tactic seems to be you get tackled, you try to get up on your hands and feet. Also, your hands and knees, and then you put the ball down on the ground, and then you use that hand to sort of like reef yourself up and then stand over it. And that has led to a lot of, dodgy play of the balls, a lot of incorrect play of the balls. And the rule is now is that it'll be a handover will be ordered instead of a scrum and anything like that. Again, no one gives a fuck about scrums. No one gives a fuck about this. Like, what I will say, though, with this play the ball rule is just actually enforce that rule properly, where there's so many play the balls last year where I'm like, that's an incorrect play the ball, and they just let it go. But then ones that kind of looked okay, that another ref would let that go. They go, oh, no, that's an incorrect play the ball. Because it's such a massive penalty, or it's such a massive switch, where if you're in your own 30 and you're getting belted and you do an incorrect play the ball, that can completely derail your momentum. Cough, cough, Brisbane Broncos. But yeah, that's normal rule. Who really cares? Just, enforce the play the balls properly.
And no more scrums. I like it.
Yeah, no more scrums. We're not rugby union. We don't push in them anyway. Like, what's the honest point of having them?
If you're not going to push, or you're not going to have one of your hookers uppercut the other hooker, just get rid of the scrum, honestly.
The last entertaining scrum we had was Tigers versus Cowboys when Robbie Farah and Watts had a little bit of a brouhaha, if you will. But yeah, so now the last one is, so when a captain's challenge is inconclusive, i.e., there's no evidence to either, say that this play did in fact happen or that it didn't, a team won't be docked their challenge and they'll actually get to keep it. Again, I'm impartial to this because I think it's just a tough, it's a tough thing for everybody involved where, it's it could be used as a ploy or a tactic. Let's slow this play down a little bit. You look at the replay and a coach can just go they are not going to be able to see this. They're not going to be able to figure it out. We're fucking tired. Not going to lose a challenge. Challenge it.
Yeah, I didn't think of that actually. Yeah, you're right. Because I was in favour of it because, how many times did it happen in 2020 that there was, the benefit of the doubt, basically, because it was inconclusive, going towards the non-challenging team. So, you believe that there was a knock-on, and let's say you rightly so believe that there was a knock-on because there was a knock-on, but just due to camera angles or whatever, it's inconclusive. So, for a fact, and even someone on the field knows that it's a knock-on, but you couldn't conclusively prove it, and all of a sudden you lose a challenge and the ball goes back to the opposition anyway. So I think if it's inconclusive, we just null and void, play on. But yes, you may be right that, imagine if a team, Roosters, also realise that they can use this kind of function of the game of rugby league to slow down the game, get a quick breather, and so on and so forth. So, I like it. But, at least there'll be a lot more confidence going into a challenge as a captain these days. And I think we'll get more challenges, which are good things, in lieu of this coach's challenge or the video referee stepping in for blatant errors or infringements. But maybe it could be used badly.
I mean, we'd do a front rower challenge to come off successfully. So maybe now the front rowers will be a little bit more a little bit more confident in that ability. But yeah, it's, like you said, we say cough, cough Roosters, but it can be the same for just any smart team, really. It isn't your own team, where these are things that can be exploited if, the situation presents itself. And I'm not against it because, I'm all for a little bit of gamesmanship and stuff like that. It's just, that's always a grey area that it's been with rugby league, I think, is it used to be benefit of the doubt. And then it was, how many tries have we seen over the last few years when it's we go with the referee's call, that if the referee had called it a try, they would have given it a try, but because he called it no try and there was no conclusive evidence to either say that he was right or wrong, that it becomes a no try. So it's just those little things like that. But I think overall, at least for me, from all of these rules for the NRL, the only one that I'm really not too sure about is the 2-point field goal. And that's only because, it's the only sport outside of the NBA that is making it that you get more points for doing something from further out. And, in the NBA, it kind of makes sense because it's a completely different sport. For the NRL, it just seems to me, and also as well because they actually make 3-pointers in the NBA. I've already gone on record, I will say that one 40-metre field goal will be scored this year, and that will be it.
That's a wrap of the new rules that we saw in 2020 and the new rules that are coming down the pipe for 2021. In next week's episode, we're going to go into some of the dream rules that we'd love to see implemented into the National Rugby League. All right, that's the end of our episode for this week. Thanks as always for listening. If you're here with us, you have a really serious rugby league problem, and for that, we thank you.
We release our episodes weekly where we preview and review every single game in the National Rugby League and also deep dive into some of the bigger issues affecting rugby league.
If you've liked what you've heard, we'd love it if you left us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Google. We've left the link in the description below this podcast. Even better, you could share this podcast with a friend or family member.
If you have a question you'd like to ask us or you really disagree with anything we've said, leave it in the comments section. We'll respond to every question, and if we don't, I'll buy you a beer.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and hit the subscribe and notify buttons on your favourite platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
For now, that's it from us. See you next week for our second week in the preview for pre-season. Smell you later.